The second decade of a new millennium begins with an extraordinary astrological event. It will be peaking, or rather in a precise alignment, on January 12th of 2020. It is the end of a vast illusion, a shared illusion, in which we did not understand that we are the authors of our own destinies. And so now we can see, in fact, we are being shown on the archetypal stage in our world right now, that if there seems to be an authoritarian dictator, king, monarch, president, who appears to abuse power with the consequence that there is social injustice and economic inequalities, of course, those things have manifested as true in the world. But now we have the opportunity to see that we have given away our power, because now we live in a world where we are instantaneously connected with one another. We can instantaneously communicate around the globe with others, just like I'm doing with you now. It's a miraculous shift that should not be taken for granted, but really we want to see what is the real force and meaning of this. And of course, it puts in our own hands, each of us, the responsibility for our own reality, for our own happiness. This is extraordinarily good news, right? Because we are not at the mercy of external forces. And if you look at history, especially 500 years ago, you will see how right now we have the echo of what was coming into being at that time in the 1500s. So several things. I'm going to give you 3 examples. One is that we had the revolution, the Copernicus revolution, in which the very startling idea was proposed that the planets do not all revolve around the Earth, but instead the planets revolve around the sun. And there are things we can debate about that whole theory, but that's pointless, because really the idea here is that that was a shift from an illusion, like pulling back the curtain in the Land of Oz, right? And that had been popular and believed for literally untold thousands of years. We simply had not recognized the true nature of our universe. The second thing we can think about from 500 years ago, whose echo is now informing the changes we're initiating at this very time, January of 2020, and forward, of course, it was the Protestant Revolution. And the religious aspects of this are not important in this discussion, but rather it was, the word Protestant, of course, is from protest. And what was being protested was the ancient belief that had been sold to the people that God Himself ordained and empowered kings and popes, etc. And so it meant that people themselves, you and I, could not have, or we believed we could not have, the right to divine connection between ourselves and the higher power, whatever way we would think of that. And instead, we had a go-between, Just like now in managed care, we have gatekeepers, right? And all of that is going. It has to go because, of course, it was an illusion and a lie. The most destructive part of that lie has still been with us in the way in which elected officials or presidents and even, of course, dictators, and that goes without saying. But the destructive part of that divine right of kings was that nothing they did, however abusive or downright brutal and inhumane, even so, their actions could not be questioned because they had been appointed divinely, and therefore there were no consequences for their behavior. They could not be held accountable for even their criminal acts because they were above the law. There was no court of law in which their case could be tried. You can immediately see how the veil of that illusion has been thinning and even lifted in recent decades in America when we have challenged the authority of the president through the process of impeachment. And 500 years ago, in fact, all of recorded history, we have had many protests, we have had many revolutions, and they were ineffective in the long term and very costly to human life in the short term, such that their gains through the revolution were often temporary and only of local or isolated consequence results. So now let's fast forward to where we are today that is so beautiful and exciting. You may remember I've talked about 2019 was our pivotal year. There was a great deal of shifting of positions. That is, many of us on a personal level moved in some way. Many of us have recently, in the past few years, even moved our homes physically to another location. But we certainly have been moving our consciousness to a different location, meaning the focal point for the power is within ourselves. This is now miraculously true as personal power when you think about the protests that we now see around the globe. If you look at headlines in the news, for example, all over the globe, young people are protesting, and they may be getting some concessions. Those are somewhat minor. The big point, though, is that whatever concessions they may receive, they are not going home. In fact, they are using this collective global village ability to communicate, to share their ideas, to share their techniques for protesting, and to join with each other, not perfectly, but as a new paradigm, to join with each other in coordinating the demand for social equalities. This has not happened before. It certainly was not happening 500 years ago when the French Revolution was limited to France, for example, that it would be a long while before someone in China even found out that it occurred. Not so now, right? So that right in our living room, at least the next day's headlines, we see with our very own consciousness, we see the tipping point has tipped. The shift in our collective consciousness is beautiful and enormous, because now we really do understand that we are global citizens. That one beautiful discovery of the physicists in the years leading up to this time, of the discovery of the Higgs boson, the discovery of the so-called God particle, which said what Martin Luther King had made famous in his letters from the Birmingham jail years ago in the protests of the 60s, that what affects one of us affects all of us. And what does this mean on your personal level? Sitting here at home, a candle lit, in my meditation this morning, what is the call for me to accept my own power? I believe that we are now able to, and of course called to, stop relying on the truth of our body's eyes, that what we see with the body's perception, we already have learned is so incredibly limited that we must withdraw belief and instead move into vision. And that is, of course, our spiritual vision, meaning the collective, the vision that we all share in our collective consciousness of the oneness of all mankind. And we know there are no separate interests. In our personal lives, we have also reached the state of criticality, that there has been a chain reaction. And on the microcosm, it's the internet, but on the macrocosm, it's the collective consciousness that is attuned to spiritual vision of our collective souls. And so I, of course, am archetypal astrologer, no different from you in the way I love to look up at the heavens, to the stars at night, and understand that on whatever level you can perceive it or envision it, the stars are guides. That's been true of ancient sailors lost at sea, looking for the pole star, the North Star, to give them direction. And astrology then, at least my brand of astrology, I see the patterns and alignments of the stars in their rhythmic orbits. That's something we really can count on, right? That the patterns they form are a language of light. That the body's eyes cannot see the resonance of light waves or sound waves, and yet we can hear. We can experience with all of our being this deep transformation that is really like an internal alchemy happening with this 500-year astrological phenomenon of the planet Saturn meeting exactly, joining together with Pluto. Saturn being the planet whose vibes are about organizing your life, the structure of your life, but doing it with integrity and with fairness. Because Saturn and Pluto are meeting in the sign of Capricorn. If we had a description of that Capricorn mountain goat being so sure-footed, being so persevering in the climb, in going whatever direction he wants to go in, and ultimately standing at the very top of a mountain like K2, where there's just sheer rock. And from there, What is the gift we are all downloading right now? I hope you are. Tune into it, because it is the gift of far seeing. And what is that? That is the beautiful spiritual way of looking past the shenanigans and the chaos of the ego's advice, of the ego's world, and seeing instead the spark that is in every heart, the light that is a great ray we all carry from our source. Symbolically, when you think of the way the moon is reflecting always the light of the sun into the dark hours here on earth, we are now stepping up to our power and saying, yes, what I want on my personal level, what my challenge and my calling is, to be the most polished mirror that I can be, to reflect the light of truth and love into the darkness of other minds. How could there be a more exalted, more blissful reason to be here now on this planet together? We had a portal open in the eclipse that we had on December 25th. It was a time of understanding and experiencing love and our connections with family and friends. And now, ahead of us, we have an even larger, well, I can't even think of a word to describe the vastness of the open door that in consciousness that we all have for January 10th, when we have the full moon eclipse in the sign of Cancer, that gives us the vision to make conscious what has blinded us to the truth in the past. And please don't think of yourselves as having done anything wrong. We were all blind. That's the point, right? That's the point in that incredible story of Oz, is people put on the green glasses voluntarily, right? Oz didn't have any power to make them do that. That's simply the metaphor for our shared delusion. So now we wake up, and January 10th is the stars aligned to make that so easy that I don't even know how a person could miss it. You can't miss it, because this is an energy that you need to share. Do not sit in this beautiful January 10th eclipse alone. Do this with at least one friend, because the whole point is that now we have a way of communicating that surpasses the limitation of the body's perception, and in fact empowers the rebel in all of us, the beautiful rebel, who now finds our voice, we find our voice, and we take action in a shared revolution in consciousness. And here is your personal challenge, all of us, for doing that. And that is, we must let go of the old delusion, the myth that we are victims, that there are a duality of victims and perpetrators in an ongoing, endless conflict. Haven't we really had enough of that? The protest I would love to see all of us join in is that we are not victims of the world that we see. In fact, we are the creators of the world we see. So if we see something we don't like, We can stop, join in consciousness in a collective circle. Circles are wonderful ways to empower this energy, where we can literally heal inside ourselves, even inside our bodies, the idea that there is something wrong with us. There's nothing wrong with us. There's nothing wrong with you. You are a magnificent and powerful being of light. So instead of a New Year's resolution that you're going to start something different because there's a different date on the calendar, instead, let's sit together in the here and now and first of all, forgive ourselves. Forgive everyone, because holding those resentments is what ties us to the ego's chaos. And so we release ourselves through forgiveness, which literally can transcend time. Make us time travelers, in that there is no past, there is no future, nothing can be created or redeemed in either of those thought concepts. Instead, we get that everything is here and now. You love yourself right in this moment as you're listening with me. You love yourself now or not at all. I love you now or not at all. And I make the decision, we can all make the decision to be happy now, because there is no such thing as being happy later. And I know that as soon as you discover that you love yourself, the very next thing you want to do with that is give it all away. Thanks for listening. This is an exciting January of 2020. And you can always reach me, email judith@judithroyal.com. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.